Oh yeah, music playing is in. Here we go.
As well as the tick-tock of the clock in the background.
Oh right, we forgot to remove the clock from the wall. Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of the Coco and Daltz podcast.
The always professionally produced podcast.
Right, I should look at the director-producer because he was pointing at me and I was talking about the clock, and then the next thing you know, we're live. We're live to the nation. I'm not Coco, by the way.
And I'm not Daltz.
And this week, what are we doing, Coco?
Quarantina-palooza.
Quarantina-palooza?
Yeah.
Are we still doing that?
Well, yeah. If you're listening to us in real time, we're on like day 584 of the self-quarantine.
There was a lot of bitterness in that. Here I was thinking this would be a great time for us to spend time together and get to know each other a little bit better.
In the biblical sense? Or
Yes, actually.
And instead, we're watching Icelandic miniseries about murder.
So tell us what we watched exactly, Coco.
We watched the Valhalla Murders, a Netflix original. As I mentioned, it's originally in Icelandic, taking place on the island of Iceland.
Wow.
We are snobs, so
where do Iceland thrillers usually take place?
Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's some kind of like joint production with the Dutch or something.
Oh,
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could be.
So,
Sorry to interrupt.
The Valhalla Murders, an 8-part series about murder in Iceland. It's focusing on the murders of people connected to a boys' home from the 80s, which, you know, nothing good ever happens when boys' homes from back in the day come into play.
And that's the case here as well.
That's the case here as well. So it focuses on the lady detective and another detective who is Icelandic but is actually working in Oslo because apparently Iceland outsources a lot of its policing to Norway. Who knew? Yeah.
Forensics, anyways.
Forensics, yeah. So they recall a guy from Oslo to help with the case, and they solve the case, but with 2 episodes left, it turns out there's more to the case than they thought they had solved.
Or else they wouldn't have done a TV series on it, probably.
Well, I mean, they still would have gotten 6 episodes anyways if they would have stopped after the original solving of the case. So
True.
Yeah, so that's the basic gist of it. Daltz, what did you think? Do you have anything to add?
I have many things to add to this one because this was a very good series, I thought.
Did you think so?
I did think so. Originally, so the first episode we started watching it, and it was subtitled because it's in the native Icelandic language. But it was also dubbed in English, and that just threw me off completely because it was like one of those bad foreign films from the 70s where the lips are moving and they're not saying what they're saying. It's like, and then one of those scenes where the characters talk a lot, but yet their lips are not moving, or the opposite where their lips are moving a lot, and then the subtitle is just, well, I'm going to the store. And then their lips are still moving.
So what Daltz is saying is, if you watch this, we recommend watching it in the native Icelandic with English subtitles, or French, or German, or Swedish, or whatever your native
floats your
language
boat.
happens to be.
I mean, that was just my take on it.
Right.
So I learned a lot of things about Iceland while watching this series. One is that there's only like 380,000 people who live in Iceland,
right? Which
is an interesting fact in itself. The other interesting fact that I found while sort of incredulous at the level of crime in this show was I was thinking, how much crime is there really in Iceland? Because I thought it was a pretty peaceful country. It's cold, so cold countries tend to be fairly peaceful. And so I looked up, and there's like an average 0.0 or 0.8 of a murder every year. And so this movie is like the slaughter of Iceland because there's murder galore in this movie, and there are a couple of references in the movie where they say it's the worst crime spree in Icelandic history.
But there's not only murder; there's also rape of both the gang rape of a teen girl in today's world, but also the rape and sodomy of young boys at the boys' homes back in the 80s, which is directly tied into the murders today. Because, like we said, nothing good ever happens when you talk about orphanages.
And this just blew me away when I started watching this movie. I was thinking, are the Icelandic people something that I don't know? Is this a new level of savagery that I have not known about?
No.
But actually, no, it's pretty fictitious. And Iceland is still a very peaceful country. Guns are not a thing there, really. There's a big scene where the cop pulls out she has to go into a safe thing to get a gun out, and he has to put a combo and everything like that.
And she doesn't even have the combination. She has to call into like 911
right.
to get the combination to the safe in the car so she can get the gun out.
Yeah, and so there was a lot of good stuff there. And as listener will know, I'm not very good at pronouncing names, so I will not even try with some of these Icelandic names. So the woman cop and the male cop came back from Oslo. He's originally from Iceland. He's got roots in Iceland. Came back to help out, as Coco said, on the forensics. The female cop has got a situation going on at home with her son and her ex-husband, and there's a second plot line there that sort of comes together a little bit. But both of these people are a mess.
Yeah.
They are very broken individuals. And so this is another layer. I was like, wow, Icelandic people are a lot deeper than I thought they were. I thought they were just kind of very happy-go-lucky, non-shooting people. But apparently there's more to them than that.
According to the Valhalla Murders, which perhaps is not.
It's perhaps not 100% accurate.
Yeah, the best arbiter of what we should feel about Iceland and its people.
Right. So maybe this was a completely American production and it got parachuted in there, but I don't think so. All the production and written by and directed by and everything like that are all Icelandic people. So it feels like an American movie, but it's actually like the story feels like a very American story. But they just dropped it into Iceland, and the landscapes and the cinematography are beautiful. I mean, we should mention it's a Netflix original.
Yeah.
And so it's not been in the theater anywhere in terms of mainstream North American theaters, anyways. But it was really well done. I could go on and talk about it, but then we would lose our listeners. So tell me, Coco, what your thoughts are.
I really enjoyed it. I actually got the "This is recommended for you" from Netflix alert because Netflix thinks that all I watch is either British shows or movies or crime shows or movies. So I got the alert saying recommended for you, and based on the description, I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. But then we watched the trailer and I was like, ooh, maybe not. So I was kind of on the fence leaning toward no when Dalt said, let's just go ahead and knock something off your playlist. And so we watched the first episode and I was hooked. We knocked out 4 on day 1 and the other 4 on day 2.
Yep.
I could have done all 8 of them in a row if we would have not run out of time.
This is what the coronavirus does right now, is it frees you up time to binge watch things like this that we probably would not have otherwise. And I'm glad that we discovered it. I mean, I'm glad you discovered it and we got into it because it was a different kind of crime show.
Yeah, as Dalt said, the scenery was just beautiful. I said to him at one point, they were driving from Reykjavik to some small village where the boys' home was located, and there were just all these beautiful mountains in the background and the sea, and I was like, imagine just driving past that every day, like it's no big deal, like you just see that every day. So the scenery was beautiful, the performances were really good, the 2 main cops were good, all the supporting cast was good. I especially enjoyed the guy who played the police chief of the small town where the boys' home was located. I thought he was kind of a buffoon, but
he added
in a
little
good
bit
way.
of mirth to it. Like shows like this need a light touch somewhere along the way. You don't want to be a clown in a completely serious Shakespearean type play kind of thing. But you still need a little bit of levity in there, and he provided that. Just his facial expressions sometimes, and when the Oslo come home detective guy was being a bit of a jerk, he would just kind of stand there and the door slams on his face and he's like, like the international language of annoyance, right? So it was, I liked him too.
Yeah, it was really, all the performances were good. I will say the one thing that maybe I didn't love so much was I mentioned the gang rape of a teen girl in current time. The lady cop's son was involved in that, and it turns out he didn't actually participate.
Spoiler.
In the gang rape. He, quote unquote, just taped it when it happened, and everybody was so relieved, and they were like, how could you think that he would be involved in this? And I'm like
that's pretty
but
involved.
He was involved in it. It didn't appear as though he tried to stop them from doing that. Like, he held up his iPhone or whatever and taped them doing it. Like, just because he didn't actually do it doesn't mean that
he was complicit. I mean,
yeah, and even if the tape hadn't appeared and it hadn't turned out that he was quote unquote only taping the other people doing it, like a large percentage of women get raped. Something like a third of women get raped, and so there's a lot of guys out there doing raping. So it just kind of rubbed me a little bit the wrong way. Like,
yeah, how they downplayed that.
Yeah, how they were kind of downplaying it. But I mean, I understand that there were the parallels with she's investigating this sex crime, and her son is perhaps involved in a sex crime, and so I understand the parallels that were being drawn there. But
still, yeah,
Well,
and that to me, in the larger form of the movie, was contributing to the downfall of her character, because she was getting distracted, and there was a couple of times when she came in late to briefings, and there was another time when she was at a crime scene and she missed something, and it was all because she was dealing with is her son guilty, is her son not guilty, and maybe destroying evidence that she thought was there, and that sort of thing. And then the fact that the Oslo come home guy was was he homosexual, and he was tortured by something that happened in his past in addition to that, and then his dad dies when he's there, and there was a lot of complexity going on with those two characters.
That was one thing that maybe I wasn't too clear on. So it turns out the Reykjavik police commissioner was involved in the boys' home. Like, basically he was providing boys as like sex toys to the guy who's one of the like the attorney general, I guess, of Iceland. And the cop who came home from Oslo was one of the foster kids of the Reykjavik police commissioner back in the 80s and 90s. And I wasn't really because they specifically said like he was the last one. So I'm like, did the police commissioner suddenly grow a conscience and decide he's out, or did this kid, did he repress memories because he's very messed up and he had a bad home life and he was taken away from his family? And the last couple episodes where sort of like the child pornography ring was exposed was kind of not
the last couple were jumbled a little bit.
Yeah.
It was almost like they were given a 10-show contract, and then all of a sudden they said, okay, we got to do it in 8.
Right.
And it seemed like the last couple were jammed together a little. Maybe it was because of the suspense, because it was a gradual buildup for those previous episodes. And maybe because the suspenseful things were starting to end in the last couple of episodes. Maybe that's why it felt like it was jammed in there. But it did seem a little bit complicated at the end and hard to tie all the loose ends together. My take on the Oslo guy was that we weren't supposed to know.
Yeah.
My take was that the haunting looks in his eyes and him constantly being grouchy and moody, and the rage that he had in that one scene where he beats that one guy up after bottling it all up inside him for most of the episodes. Like, my interpretation of that was he had something going on in his past, and I think you can make the leap that's something, especially when he befriends that little boy and tries to connect with him, whereas he does not connect with any other character pretty much in the entire series, even his partner, in a tangible, serious way. So to me, it was more about subtlety, and I actually thought that was cool because it wasn't obvious. It wasn't flashbacks every episode of what happened to him and everything like that, which, the first couple of times those things have been done were good, but now everybody does those kinds of things to kind of hammer you over the head with, here's the message, here's what this guy's being haunted by. But I didn't have as much of a problem with that, but I do agree with the other things. Like, there was a bit of a car crash at the end there in terms of wrapping everything up. It seemed like everything was being jammed into those 2 episodes, but it didn't take away from the larger series for me. I still got a lot out of it. I learned a lot about Iceland, let me tell you. You think that I'm goofing off when I'm looking at my phone during these shows. You think that I'm like, looking at, I don't know, Booty Call or something like that, but I'm actually looking at IMDb or what happened, the wiki page or whatever happens to be, to try to find out more information about the movie or where it takes place, or see if I know anybody in it.
One other thing I did enjoy about it was everybody looked like real people.
Right.
Like the main cop lady She had a bad dye job. She had a couple inches of root hanging out of the top of her head. Her
Only
hair,
you would notice that.
Her hair was fried. Like, she just threw it up in a ponytail. Like, at one point, she had to take off her shirt because she got puked on.
Right.
And she didn't have...
By a suspect, yep.
A model thin body.
Right.
Like, she looked like a real person. And that's one thing I liked about it, was not everybody... Like, you watch, like, an American cop show, and at 3 o'clock in the morning when they get called to crime scenes, they've got a perfect blowout.
Right.
And perfect makeup, like, for a photo shoot. And I was like, yeah, no, this is not real life at all. So.
Well, I can throw that to a recent example of us watching those 3 virus movies, and we watched Pandemic, the Hallmark special for kicks, and we saw Tiffany and French Stewart showing, bellying up to work every day at 9 a.m. when meanwhile this pandemic is destroying the city, and they're all perfectly coiffed, and they have their makeup on, and they have their cup of Joe in their hand, and they're like, hey, how's it going? Like, it's just like another Monday at the office. So yeah, a stark contrast. Like, this is real life, and I thought the Oslo guy wore that well too, because he was haunting. He was haunted and haunting both, and he had you could tell that he was, he was billed as a runner in this show, but he definitely had some physical issues going on there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he wasn't out at the gym like pumping iron or anything. He was definitely, and yeah, they all looked exactly how you would expect them to look.
Well, and it's nice. I like to.
They were all wearing like dark clothing.
Right.
It was just very like, I think she wore the same jacket like
pretty much
every episode. Yep. They weren't fashion plates.
Which is real life, right? I mean, how many people have 5 coats and wear a different one every day? Like, not cops, that's for sure. I mean, I don't know what the pay is in Reykjavik. It's probably, or in Iceland, it's probably pretty good, because they have socialized society there. So everything is very similar, very even. As I learned as I was looking into Iceland, is that there's not a lot of income inequity.
Oh, that's nice.
So as a result, there's not a lot of drugs, there's not a lot of crime, there's not a lot of this, not a lot of that. So a lot of those scenes were like, oh yeah, he was high on crack or something like that. Or there was one scene where there was a reference to cocaine or crack or something like that by one of the bad guys. And I was thinking, I wonder how much there is really that problem in Iceland. And I looked it up and said, no, there's hardly any drug problem. There's hardly any firearms on the island, in the nation. So I learned a lot about it. One of the things that I liked about this movie, and I have seen in a previous movie about that took place in Iceland, and I can't remember what it was the lighting. The lighting was very blue. Yeah. I don't know if you noticed that, or like, and you referenced the clothing being dark, and everything it was very almost monochromatic.
Yeah.
The characters and the landscape and the cars they drove and everything was very muted. And I don't know if that's because light, I imagine in a place like Iceland is so far north, is probably a valuable thing, right? And so they've played with the light a lot in this movie, and the cinematography, and like I said, a lot of the scenes look like they're bluish, got a bluish tinge to them. And I thought that was really effective in this story, because everything takes on kind of a little bit of a, I don't want to say melancholy blue, but it takes like a different kind of feel to it when you've got that filter on the camera all the time. So I really recommend this. I mean, I don't often like sitting through 8 episodes of anything, really, but this was a good one. And they're all around 45 minutes long.
Right.
They're very bingeable, they're very doable, and there's not a lot of padding here. There's not a lot of superfluous material where you're thinking, oh, why is that character in there?
Right. Or like, oh, at the beginning of episode 3, we're going to have a 10-minute monologue by somebody recapping what we saw in the first 2 episodes.
Right. Yeah, and you got to keep up. Like, it's one of those series, too, where they're not going to go back. Like, I was expecting after the end for them to do, like, some sort of Hollywood-type recap where the main 2 characters are talking about what happened in order to fill everybody in on what happened and educate them as to the plot line and everything like that. And they never really did that.
Yeah, there were a few times when they would reference somebody who got murdered in episode 1, and I'd be like, wait, who was that person again?
Yeah.
Or, oh, and then I'd have to think about it for a minute and be like, oh, okay, that's who that is,
Well, and the danger of these long series, too, is that you mentioned something about her being in the trunk of a car at the beginning. In the first episode, we see that, and I completely forgot about that moment. And you're like, I wonder when she's going to get out of the trunk of the car. And I was like, oh, right. She was in the trunk of the car at the beginning of this. Because it's so funny when you're thrown into a series like that, and you don't know the characters, you don't know the setting, you don't know the plot, really, other than what you've read on the summary. And then it comes back around a little bit like that. You're like, oh, right, I remember that. But there weren't a lot of moments in this story at all like that.
Mm-hmm. So on the whole, I definitely give it 2 thumbs up.
I give it 2 frosty thumbs up because it's in Iceland.
Which they were outside a lot, and she was frequently not wearing gloves. And I was like, you're way tougher than I am because there's like all this snow all over the ground. And I know you're from Iceland, but
they're probably used to it.
Oh my God.
If you're born and raised in Iceland, you're probably used to ice and snow and cold.
I know, but still. When you're looking for a Toyota Yaris, like going around a garage looking in all these windows and you don't have gloves on, like, maybe wear some gloves. I don't know.
I thought that was funny too, that particular scene where they're looking for the Toyota Yaris, and it was from 2012 to 2014 or whatever the model year was. It was a longer window than that. And they said, there's 500 sold on the island in that time. I was thinking, 500 cars? There's 300,000 people. How many other cars are there? Is this like the most popular car on the island?
And I was like, why don't you just run the registrations for all those and see who they're registered to? And if any names pop up, like, boom, there you go.
Right. There was a lot of really good detective work in this. There was a lot of really good, I thought when they interviewed some of the boys who had been in the school, that felt real to me when they were retelling those stories. There were some interesting angles there about the journalist breaking all this news, somehow getting all this great information on the side.
It was nice to see a journalist who actually asked somebody hard questions instead of just throwing softballs at them like we get here in the American media, you know?
Or even it's just the portrayal of journalists in some of these movies are like they're all standing there like fish with their mouths open with microphones in their hands. And that's not the way. I mean, people ask hard questions. We've seen some pretty good press conferences lately in the Oval Office in the White House, I should say, where journalists have asked hard questions. And so there are hard questions asked in real life, but in movies it tends to be just portrayed as people with cameras and stuff like that. And so, yeah, you're right. That was really the woman she was a strong character. The lead detective, the woman character, the woman who we were talking about, she's a strong character, being the lead detective. Her boss was a woman. She was a fairly strong character, but she was a woman, so there was a good strength there. Iceland is very much about gender equity and income equity and all that sort of stuff. They have legislation that they passed in their government to make sure these things happen. And I think it was kind of reflected in this movie too. It wasn't like, oh, hey, we're going to make this, this is a token gesture. Here we go. It was just part of the fabric of the story. So I thought it was really well done all the way around. It was a nice story, and it was a nice glimpse into a society that I've never been to really, other than a stopover in Reykjavik one night.
So there you go. 4 thumbs up.
4 thumbs up.
So for another week of the Quarantina-palooza, I'm not Dobbs.
And I'm still not Coco.